Growing up, I took really every opportunity to just be in the outdoors. And Dad would go out on Saturdays and feed cattle, and I'd take my backpack, my BB gun, and he'd just drop me off. And I'd just be gone for hours.
All right, guys, welcome to week 2 or episode 2 of DP Deconstruct. This week, we're going to go way back, January of 2020, 3 years ago. And we want to talk more this week about what you can do with less equipment than the opposite. Last week we were kind of like, gear, and obviously we think it's very important, but it's not realistic for everybody. And a lot of people, your starting point, you're not going to have all the gear. So we want to take it back to when we were this is one of the first big shoots we did together.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we chose this was because there's very few shoots that we look back at that we're like, oh yeah, we like that, we love it, and for the most part, the interview portion of this shoot, man, we look back even today as we were going through it. It was like, this looks great, and you're shooting on old technology, and different. Yeah, and it just shows that if you can nail those little things that matter. This was one of the very first things that we did together that we're like, hey, let's take some time and actually put some effort into it. And so tell us what it is and what we're doing and why.
Okay. All right. So again, we're back with Josh. This building, he's a host of an episode or a series called Building Whitetails. And what that is he's going about telling the audience how he is building a mecca for whitetails in his little 80-acre piece, right? And this was the episode that introduced the whole series. This was episode 1, year 1. We called it the year for building whitetails. And like you said, we were very happy with it.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that we really appreciate is that this is the first shoot where we had a disagreement.
Yeah, actually it's true.
It was. And
who was right on that disagreement?
I wouldn't say right or wrong. What I would say is we went with your choice.
I'll say right.
No, Matt, this is.
It was actually the first time I think I was there.
I think so too. This is very indicative though of technical versus creative. And not saying you're not creative, not saying I'm not technical, but I lean more when we're on a shoot, I'm going to lean more toward, hey, that light's a little bit too hot. Hey,
the technical side of it.
Right. And then Matt, you're going to be more of like, hey, I think this is going to help invite people more. This is a better story. This works with the story better. And story won on this one for sure. So let's break the shot really quick down. This is more about the gear we're using as far as getting more out of lesser equipment. But I think one of the most important parts of this whole shot is that it was lit well.
Yeah.
Right? So let's break that down.
And I think what you were saying, like the atmosphere of this place really told the story to invite you into the whole idea of a whitetail habitat, Josh's story, who he is, where he comes from, background. And that was a big portion of that. And so we didn't want to lose that. And that's kind of actually is what allowed us to begin to stage all of our lighting. And so I'll start with just this key light. We were using an Aputure 120D Mark II. And so you can see it right here. This is our key light. And it's coming from a very high angle. It's not the 45 degrees. It's coming from, because we didn't want that light to spill all over that cool vibe we were trying to put forward, for lack of a better word, is we're over here. We don't want light, all over the place, and we're losing that really warm, inviting feel. We're trying to get the audience to be invited into Josh's story, into who he is, and why people should listen to him, And so this is our key light. Again, it's an Aputure 120D. It wasn't bicolor.
The 120D is
daylight balance, so it's
daylight.
5500. Is really what it's set at. And so that's our light, and you can see it's coming down at a very broad angle. The hard part is Josh was also wearing a flannel shirt that just kind of had that cool feel, but we still wanted to make sure that we were, highlighting the company who's really putting this this series together. And so he wants to wear a hat, and we're going, okay, how do we do this without losing? And throwing light all over the scene and doing that. And that's where we had to make sure that he was separated from the background, not just falling off into this, black abyss, or, just part of whatever's going on back there. And so we have, a light making sure that happening. And then we have kind of a bounce fill light. And I'll let you just kind of talk through the thought process of those two.
Well, and quick to piggyback off what you were talking with the key light and not wanting it to spill. We had a grid so that it would keep everything on it. It's like a honeycomb attachment that you put on it so that you don't get that really wide span.
Yeah.
It's directional.
And they're about 2 inches thick. And what it does is it makes longer. And so that light can't just spread. It just instantly goes through these channels and has a much less beam angle. And so ultimately, definitely. And so we had that. But then we also had that light at a higher angle.
Exactly.
So that way it's not spilling all over the walls back
and
here.
in the background. Because it's still going to go. I just thought it was important to note that the way we got that was by using what's called a grid, right? So for the rim light, like you were talking about, it's actually more of like a hair light. And the difference of a hair light is it's more of a high angle shooting down. And so we had just a cheap light. I don't know if you can even see it. You can't see we had it on a C-stand with a grip arm. And then we had a friction arm off of that was holding a light. And like I said, it was just a cheap light, but it was flicker-free LED. You could adjust the Kelvin on it. Super cool little light. But we had that almost over the top of the back of his head to really isolate him from the background, because what we didn't want to do was have him getting lost in the background, right? And so...
And you can see it on his hat and on his cheekbones.
You always want to have a rim light. I think we talked about this last time. Like, in our opinion, rim light's one of the most important lights in a setup at all, just because you don't ever want your subject to not stand out and be the focus of...
Yeah, and that rim light can be a natural, practical light. It can. I mean, I'm looking at you now. You have some purple setting you apart from the background of whatever's going on. And I think that's one of the things that I think people just are like, I don't want to take the time. It's like, that time takes you 3 minutes. Post-production is going to be better, and you're going to be way out of that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's why, again, like the little things like this is why we're still proud of this, because the fundamentals of the lighting, in my opinion, were right there.
Right. So. And it wasn't so much about the cameras or the equipment. We just took our time and did the lighting, right? You mentioned a bounce, and you can see a bounce right here. And what's funny is we had a little light stand that we hooked this to, and it's a little Aperture MC.
Before we did that, we were almost ready to shoot that. And we were like, man, you just can't do it.
Well, again, I think that was you. I think you were sitting on the A-cam, and you're like, man, there's so much fall off. And at that time, we didn't have the gear that we have now.
Yep.
Like, this was a lot of gear to us back then, and that's awesome that we've grown since then. But this was a lot, and we were like, "Oh no! Like, what do we have?"
Yeah.
And we just happened to have another friction arm or some way to connect that, another little plastic stand, and this little tiny light. And so we turned it on, and at first, it is kind of uplighting a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's something I would change now. But it's a good look. Yeah. It's a really good look.
Oh, and I hope you can always look back at your work and go, this is what I do now that I know, I have knowledge, wisdom. The whole reason we're doing this whole thing, right? Like we don't desire just to, not grow and learn, because at the end of the day, our trade gets boring. Right. And so constantly learning, but at what we had and what we did, I felt like, man, we really allowed to separate him from the background and tell the story of the place, the invitation. And really we did that with a minimum, setup.
Oh yeah, really minimal gear.
We used 6 lights, but those lights didn't even come up to one of our light. This light right here now, like you could buy all of those under that.
The best light wasn't even as powerful as this light.
Yeah, not even close.
So, okay, well, you want to break down the lighting more, or you feel pretty?
I felt good about it. I would just say in the background real quick, we talked about practicals last time. We have a lamp based over here. It's throwing light over here, over here, over here. That's kind of setting the tone for that background. And then back here, we did have like a blue light just to separate the image a little bit. And that's actually hiding behind this post. And so I just say,
you can see it.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. But I'm sorry, from cam A.
Right.
Okay, we were using this as a hiding that. I'm sorry.
Right.
And so anyway, yep, I think that's good, man. At the end of the day, like, just taking a little bit of time, like you said, we talked through this before we even got into it, and then built the scene the way we wanted to really make it feel warm, inviting, and to tell a story.
Well, I think that's a good thing to hit on for a second. Is this was our first major shoot. We've already talked about that, and we kind of had to learn how to build a set together, because we had never done it before. And there was the banter back and forth of like, hey, what direction do we want to shoot or whatever. But then there was, well, how do we want to light this? It's not like now we've lit things so much.
Yeah.
we know, I know, Matt, if you're working on the key, I'm going to go hit the rim. If you're working on the rim, I'm going to go hit the key, and then we're going to feel it fine. Like, we have a system, but then we didn't. And when you're just starting out learning how to light a set or the set dress or whatever, how to block your lighting, take time, just slow down. Find a project where it allows you to slow down a little bit and use those projects to be able to figure things out, or sit in your living room and do it yourself, right? You're never going to learn this.
We actually talked through that with this shoot. Is like, if we go and you just shoot something and you're just carefree and go, like, there's a lot of responsibility on us to be able to tell this story and to build a series that's going to last, it's 3 years now of people following. And Josh has gained a lot of respect through this series because it's been done well. And the only thing I would say with that is, like, if we just, hey, put up a camera, don't care, just go, like, I believe people take things more serious when you can see the time, effort, and resources put into it. And so I think that was what we were trying to establish with the shoot and talking through it.
Yeah, and to caveat that even, I would say that this was the catapult for us getting bigger and better project. Like, this was the first project that we were like, the budget wasn't there for this.
No, we
way over delivered for this project, but we wanted to do it because this was a chance to be able to make something that we could show, to be able to go bid out for that next bigger project.
And did it work?
Very much so.
And that was the goal. So
yeah, don't be afraid to slow down. But let's go ahead and talk about equipment.
Cool. So we used 3 cameras. Those cameras were all Sony 8-bit mirrorless cameras. I think 2 A7 A7R3s and 1 A7 III is all we had at the time. And so we have Cam A is over here, and that's kind of the camera that Josh is looking at, the eyeline sight. There's kind of eyesight going there. This camera, typically, like I said, we would shoot this on shadow side, but because of the dramatic feel and that it's not flat lighting with it, it still worked well, and it was a different focal length, so it brought you in, or I actually widened out that shot while the other one brought you in, and so we bounced back between that. And then our third shot is the one that we're looking at right here. We have a Rhino slider that is automatic. It just moves back and forth. And so we set that, and we used it many times to, again, show the atmosphere, show that Josh has deer sheds all over, and that the truth is that man is respected because he is passionate about what he does. And so this thing kept kind of telling that. We wanted to show a little bit of behind the scenes so that we could keep drawing you back into that story, right? Mm-hmm. And so I know we'll play some of that footage back and forth throughout this whole thing, but like that Rhino, that slider really did kind of draw you back into the story, that it didn't just get cumbersome.
Well, and movement always helps. We talked about last time the difference between being able to use stills or have motion is that you can add motion to the camera to be able to induce emotion, right? Or introduce emotion. And so doing that, it was a lot of times we use that angle to come back in from a B-roll piece, or if we were talking out in the field, we would use this wide angle to invite people back in.
As DPs, that's what we're doing. We're thinking about that. So we're going to show behind the scenes of microphones and cameras and all of these things. You better have a purpose for the reason of doing so. And
super cool, right? No one cares.
And to me, when I still show this video, and I like to look at it because it was like, hey, we did a good job with the story, a good job with the lighting, and ultimately the delivery of this whole thing is what we were excited about. And so, that's when we're showing all this, that was the purpose behind the back, the B-roll, and so it allowed for room to show a little bit of the microphones and those kind of things.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about this A7R, A7 III, and it's 8-bit and the limitations of it. I think we should break down what does that even mean, right? So do you want to talk about what are the limitations on a Sony of an 8-bit? Like, what exactly are
and I think you and I went through this over and over again. What picture profile should we shoot in? What, and then, you're like, this is best, this is best, this is best. And, hyperlog gamma, and really it's just a baked in image because there's not any information. It's no different from shooting RAW or JPEG. JPEG is a finished image where RAW is going to have that. Well,
so with like HLG, you're looking for the LUT, essentially, or the profile that gives you the closest to natural look that you can get.
You want dynamic range, and if you don't know what dynamic range is, it's how much information you have from all the way to the highs to the lows of that. So the brightest and the darkest of that image, like the more you can spread that out, the more information is there, right?
Right.
And so that's ultimately what the limitation, I would say, of a mirrorless camera, at least those models back in the day, were, Sony 8-bit footage didn't really allow you to shoot in what you would call log, that everybody's, it's popular to shoot in today. Log is able to, have much flatter of an image, and so it squeezes everything here, and we don't have anything on the, clipping on the low end and clipping at the high end, and then you can spread that out in post because of something called 8-bit or 12-bit or a 10-bit color. And the difference, we can get into all the nerdy stuff, but at the end of the day, that's a a whole conversation in itself.
I wanna hit on something. You said that log is a flat profile that allows you to maximize your potential for dynamic range, right? It's a starting point.
Oh my gosh, you're getting into it.
I'm gonna get on a tangent here. Like, we see all the time.
It's one of my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah,
like
projects-
don't shoot in log if you don't know how to deliver it.
Right. Projects should never be delivered in log or anywhere around log. Like, it's popular right now, but it's not right.
It's popular because people just don't know how to
People don't
finish
know how to do it, and the right people,
it.
right brands
Might
deliver
make some
that.
seriously
Hey,
upset
you know what?
people,
Who
but at
cares?
the end
Learn
of
your
the day,
job.
it's wrong.
Yeah. And so, and if you
Aaron
can't,
and I will call that out.
yeah, we will. And if you can't do it, we can call us so we can fix it for you. But like, that's, in my mind, that's a starting point, and the whole reason is it gives you the dynamic range so that you can come back later and grade it and make it look correct,
Absolutely.
and processed and colored. And
Yeah, and so and really just to talk through that, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but 8-bit is 256 of red, 256 colors of green, 256 colors of blue. You times all that together, and it's like 1.63 million,
16.3.
16.3 million colors, and that sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot until you really start to understand that, at the end of the day, you get gradients in the walls here, gradients in the skies, gradients in shadows and skin tones. And the more information there is, the more you can separate it. And so when you start getting into a camera that can shoot 10-bit, there's a lot more forgiveness. And the reason we chose this shoot in general is it was shot in 8-bit, and it was done right to where we still looked at it today and went, man, this looks good.
Really good.
And I think it just goes down to, like, if you spend more time in the production of it pre-pro and while you're shooting it, it really makes the back end just easy. And that still goes whether you're shooting 10-bit 12 or raw.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't mean that you just have to fix it in post. And so anyway, I would just say
I
that's
agree.
a big part of that.
Like you were saying, with the numbers, and 16.8 sounds like a huge number. 16.3 or 16.8 million, whatever it is, sounds like a huge number until you get into 10-bit.
Yeah.
And then you get to 12-bit.
Yeah.
10 bits,
billions of colors.
10 bits just over 1 billion.
Yeah.
I think 12 bits, 60 something billion shades. Like that's a lot.
It's a lot of information.
Right? And that's 12-bit. From there you can still go to raw.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think it's just important, like you were saying, if you are shooting an 8-bit, which sometimes you can. At that time, that's all we had. That's all we could shoot with. So if your limiting factor is that, hey, I'm shooting with an A7 III or a camera that's 8-bit or a Canon that's 10-bit, if you're shooting with a camera or a profile that's limited on color, and you're finding that a lot of times when you're in post, you're getting those weird gradients on skin, or you're getting the weird gradients, what that says to me is you need to slow down on set and just make sure it's right.
Yeah.
Just take that time, and
And I will,
exactly what we did here.
We'll be honest. We've had plenty where we've messed up on set, and we had no ability to fix it in post. I remember one where we thought it'd be really cool to light a wall red because the colors of that company were red, and it was miserable in post production because we should have just slowed down for a minute and actually backed up and been like, okay, we have all sorts of spill happening, all sorts of things, but we really didn't. That's what happens when you just don't take the time to separate them from that red background that we wanted to do.
And it's
We
a
would have done
learning
that.
experience.
Yeah. And we learned from it.
Yeah, it's a learning experience, and that's something that we had to learn. And you know what? We haven't made that mistake again.
And I refuse to do it.
Right. So that's getting into the equipment. The reason we chose this one was because we wanted to talk about the importance of, if you are limited to your 8-bit or to a camera that you're having problems with, just slow down.
Yep.
Before we end this podcast, I want to touch on audio because you're the audio guy.
Okay.
And now we have mics that
We're getting outside of the DP realm, but sure.
I understand, but we're going to do that a lot on this podcast.
Squirrel.
Right now we have podcasts. Right now we have microphones that are better at isolating the subject and isolating, just getting the sound, the tonality that you want out of a mic, right? And the reason I'm saying this is because on this wide shot you can see these blankets right here. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of screening. You can see these blankets that we have right here, and there's a reason that we had that, because you can see here we had them laved up, but if possible, you always want a boom. Am I right?
Oh yeah, the boom always has a much more fuller spectrum without compressing.
Right. So the problem that we were getting with this boom, this was an NTG2, right?
Rode and
Yeah.
TG2, yeah.
So the problem that we had, that was great. Hold on, I'm gonna go back a little bit. So this boom mic was an NTG2, correct?
Yep. A Rode NTG2.
All right. So we had a Rode NTG2, which a lot of people in the industry have.
Yep.
I see this mic all the time. There are limitations to this microphone.
Not a horrible mic, but it's a good starting microphone. I feel like a good first boom or whatever.
It was my first boom,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if this was mine or yours, but it was my first boom. I think you had already upgraded, but I brought this. What were we having a problem with, and why did that mean that we ended up having these blankets on the ground?
So, you have hard floors. Right now, if you go back into Josh's place, this is all wood floors, but at this time it was cement. And you have hard walls, you have hard floors, and you have hard ceilings. That's a absolute disaster for audio,
Right.
because of the reflections and all of those things. Like at the end of the day, like the more you can soften that up, use couches to break up the reflections. Use blankets. Use set up some. I think you can buy an acoustic blanket on B&H for like $60. So trust me, it's like one of your best friends. And so we quickly recognized that and threw them on the floor, and Josh sat on them, and you can tell they're not even that smooth on the floor. Those little things help. The more, the thicker they are and the more they can absorb. So what you're trying to do is take a soft fabric that is absorbing those reflections, and it keeps it from bouncing all over the place. And now you have real crisp and clean audio. And that was one of the things that we were both proud of right away in that video.
Yeah. Well, and this just shows that it doesn't take an elaborate setup. Even with audio, a lot of times you're going to see acoustic blankets, the paneling on the walls. We have some foam board up right now. Like, you can do that, and everything you do is going to be better. And there's stuff that I don't understand, bass traps and like all the intricate. I don't get all that yet, right? But even just throwing down a couple old comforters did a lot for the audio.
It was amazing.
We'll play a piece now.
My name's Josh Pretzer, and I'm a fourth-generation farmer, and building whitetails is really something that I'm just extremely passionate about. It's the work and the effort and all the anticipation and laying in bed at night just really dreaming about that end goal. It's the whole culmination of the plan that is just so intriguing. And I want to invite you guys along, and we're gonna have a blast. We're gonna have a ton of fun with this.
Okay, so that sounded really good.
Thanks.
That was 100% you. But I guess to bring everything down back so we can wrap this up, the whole point of this is to talk about, on this shoot, we did not have a full suite of grip gear and cameras and lenses. You had a million lenses. And lenses and all the good audio gear. And we didn't have everything. We weren't colorists.
Yeah.
That's when we were starting to get into color grading. But what allowed us to be able to set this up to where it's one of our favorite shoots of all time is that we slowed down. And I think that's the takeaway.
I agree. I would, and again, I think I would just say, like, we're not doing this podcast there's so much that I need to learn. Every time I go on a shoot, I'm learning something new.
Yeah.
I know we chat and sometimes probably sound arrogant in the things that we do, but it's really because we've learned that there is a proper way. We've had many people who are like, wow, this is really grand and big and this is really involved. And it's like every single one of them have come back and been like, hey, that was worth it. You know, because once you take a little bit of time to slow down and build it right in camera, separate those people from the backgrounds, build the set out, make sure that the atmosphere, the story's going. You don't have to try as hard to strive in post-production. And I think that's ultimately the goal.
Well, and we see, especially, a lot of the more commercial stuff that we do, there is a lot more time and budget and a team to allocate for lighting and sound or whatever. But if you talk to the outdoor space, a lot of it's, you can't take a key light, a rim light, a fill light, and sit in a tree stand while you're hunting. Like, you can't do that. And I get that. But even then, understanding directional light, understanding how to mic a subject.
If you're gonna do an interview in the woods and you don't have those things, understanding the basics of light is actually your best friend. Carry a quick white card around in your, or something that you can fold out in a camera case with the sun. You can do a lot with that.
Yep.
And don't always just face them towards the sun and think that that's your call it an interview, because you can really begin to build a set with just understanding those basics real quick. That's the whole point of being a DP.
Yeah, well, I mean, a DP, really, a lot of people say producers are problem solvers, and that's really not true. The problem solvers are the DPs.
Yeah.
The DP, at the end of the day, what the image looks like, it's a DP's job. And if you want to be a DP or claim to be a DP or start working in that realm, what you've got to figure out is, how can I use whatever I have at my reach or with me to be able to make this shot as good as it can be.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
There's movies where they use foam core. Yeah. And that's the light they have.
Oh, man. Foam core has saved us millions of times.
Right.
We'll get into negative fills and maybe bounces and stuff next time, or
some other time in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's pretty.
That's it.
Pretty good.
Episode
pretty
2
basic.
of DP Deconstruct.
Slow down.
Slow down.